Good evening. I'm delighted to be here to discuss trends with Schweitzer. Allie is with WAMU Radio. It's an NPR affiliate. She is the business and development reporter. She covers economic policy, housing, and matters related to the private sector for NPR. As a writer on the year-long Affordability Desk project, she looks into causes, effects, and potential solutions to the DC area's affordability crisis. She reports on the cost of living and the repercussions of the high cost of living in our region. Welcome, Allie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. Well, we are living in unprecedented times with COVID-19, so that's going to be my first question to you. How is COVID-19 affecting affordable housing in our region?
Well, there's a lot going on. I would say I'm going to start off with a little bit of background, though, and this is stuff that maybe some of our audience members already know, but I'm going to go through it because I think it's really important context. You know, prior to the pandemic, the industry was facing really big challenges already, mostly related to the cost of land in the places where we really need affordable housing. In our region, nonprofit developers talked a lot about mounting competition from luxury development, condo development, especially in areas that are close to transit, they're close to jobs, they have strong community amenities, and that challenge has not gone away. But I will say it's interesting to see some developers and advocates talk about potential opportunities presented by the pandemic. So I'll talk a little bit about that. They say that they can now make an even stronger case, of course, that more public funding is needed for affordable housing because we know many more people are going to need it as we rebuild our economy post-pandemic. Some developers say to the extent that the pandemic pauses market rate development or rents go down or vacancies go up, that the market rate sector's loss is affordable housing's gain. Right? So if land values decrease, for example, maybe that's an opportunity to acquire more sites for affordable housing. I'm sure this is something that AHC Inc. is thinking about taking the long view of things. But, there are a lot of downsides too. And it's really hard to talk about this without really focusing on those because they're enormous, such as if the pandemic presses the pause button on market rate development, for example. What about the development where a certain number of units are required to be affordable? A lot of jurisdictions have laws that require, or zoning policies that require a certain number of affordable units in a new private development, right? If you lose private development or market rate development, you're also losing those units. So this is an issue in Montgomery County and the district in Northern Virginia. And another really big downside is the loss of tax revenue for governments and how that could affect public gap funding for affordable housing. We could also start to see more need for very low income units. And we know that's a sector where you really need funding. The more tax revenue is lost, the more budgets will be cut. Where this is already happening. We could see for years to come, governments on the state and local level trimming their investment in affordable housing as part of overall austerity measures. And I know this is a long answer, but there's just a lot going on, Wanda, so I wanted to get into it. And, when it comes to affordable housing properties locally, like AHC Inc.'s portfolio, I would think they're concerned about rent collection. We know that many of the region's residents who live in affordable housing work in industries that were hit very hard by the pandemic, hospitality, restaurants. And to date, there's still a big question mark around what happens to those residents and their housing providers once these various eviction bans end. What about the solvency of these housing providers? There has not been, to my mind, on any level of government, a satisfactory answer to that question. And this is the last thing I'll say. I want to talk about the federal government, and then I'll let you get to the next question. The steps that the federal government can take to stem, for example, a homelessness crisis. A lot of those steps are going to come down to who wins the election. We've seen the last 4 years, the stance that the Trump administration's HUD has had toward fair housing, toward public housing, and it's not a stance that advocates want to see continue. So I think on the federal level, a lot of advocates are really hoping to see policy changes that truly meet what they're anticipating will be immense need for access to affordable housing across the country.
Right. And what about the upcoming federal assistance? What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you think is going to be happening soon, or?
I wish I had a crystal ball because every day something changes. I was looking at, what is it? Are they still going to vote on that smaller package that the Republicans put out this week? I honestly, I kind of stopped watching because every day it's, oh, well, there's this coming from the Senate and there's this coming from the Senate. And there's just the gap between where the House Democrats are and where the Senate Republicans are so vast. I mean, I'd be surprised if we do get another coronavirus relief package before the election, but the news changes every day. So tomorrow could be something different.
So let's change. Let's look at the local jurisdictions. How are the local jurisdictions responding to the crisis?
Well, they're responding with the tools they have, and that's in two main ways. I mean, one is with legislative or judicial action that's intended to keep people in their homes as long as the virus continues to spread. And the other is, of course, with rental assistance to tenants and landlords. So I'll start with talking about the legislative and the judicial part. I'll take the example of Virginia. Virginia doesn't have an eviction ban anymore, not a statewide eviction ban. They had one. It was kind of came and go, it went in spurts. After the pandemic began, the Supreme Court of Virginia said we're not going to do evictions, but that was kind of up and down for a while. Some people fell through the cracks, and now there's no statewide, court-wide ban at all in Virginia. But renters in all housing across the state who earn less than $99,000 a year, they're, in theory anyway, protected under an eviction moratorium ordered by the CDC. So lawmakers in Virginia are also considering legislation that would impose a statewide ban that kicks in after the CDC ban expires at the end of the year. But it's clear, that bans on evictions, and by the way, I'll give a shout out to AHC because I know that AHC Inc. has an eviction ban in its own portfolio. Yes. So this is an important step, but it's clear, that bans on evictions only go so far. And landlords are very worried about them because they leave them, of course, holding the bag. So the things landlords really want is more rent assistance. So I'll talk about what local governments are doing on that front. Virginia set aside $50 million in federal funds for rent assistance. That money is fanning out to nonprofits across the state who process the applications for the assistance. They award the funds. DC has a couple different pots of money for this. Montgomery County has some. But governments have faced challenges in actually getting the money out the door. In Virginia, landlords couldn't apply for rental assistance themselves, for example, when the program was first rolled out. So they had to rely on tenants to apply. And when you have tenants, you have tenants who maybe don't feel the same urgency as the housing provider does, that can take time and personal appeals to renters to get them to apply for the assistance. That has changed, but that was a big hang up. And then in DC, the director of the city's housing department said, this is interesting to me, that the millions that the city has allocated for rent assistance is actually undersubscribed. People aren't applying for it, right? That surprised me. Yeah. And it seems that, and this is really fascinating to me because it's where, where policy and kind of good intentions collide. It seems that it's because the city has a very strong ban on evictions. It has a comprehensive ban. You cannot be evicted for any reason in the courts in DC, not even for violating your lease, not for anything that is not related to non-payment. So basically you can't get evicted for any reason in DC right now. It's the strongest ban in the country. So people are not applying for these funds because they know they can't be evicted. So that's according to the director of the DC's housing department. So, so in Montgomery County, we're seeing, lawmakers there have big concerns about, how slow the county executive's administration has been in spending federal relief funds. They have, for rent assistance of millions of dollars set aside, but it's taken a while to reach people, longer than I would think. I would think people would be banging down their door, to get this money, but apparently it's been slow to go out. So my point is that governments across the country are dealing with immense administrative problems, actually spending the relief funds they have. And that money has to be spent by the end of the year. So the clock is ticking, and all of this is to say, state and local governments are using the tools they have, to fight this crisis, but consistently what you'll find, what they're saying is that more needs to be done on the federal level, especially with rental assistance, because the federal relief dollars that have already gone out won't be enough to pay everybody's rent. So it's inevitable without a lot more money that we're going to see more evictions and more homelessness. And for landlords, we might see more mortgage defaults and foreclosures. So across our region, across the US, we're seeing urgent cries, like you said, for another relief package that truly matches the scale of the crisis. And from what I can tell, that's not looking very likely imminently.
That is such a shame. People are suffering. Well, I have to say, our local jurisdiction here is doing a great job, and I saw in the list of attendees, I saw our fearless leader, Nita Friedman from DHS. Keep up the good work, Anita. You're really helping a lot of families and working with all of our partners here and nonprofits here in Arlington. So maybe we can be a model. Okay, let's go on to the next question. How are people helping struggling families?
This is individuals, I think, are really
Yes.
stepping up. You know, I think, and that's so important right now because governments are strapped. And so, you know, on a community level, I'll give you an example of one of the more innovative initiatives that I've seen that I really enjoy talking about. I did a story about it. It's a new philanthropic effort in the district that I think probably could be replicated across the region. And I'm saying this to you because I know that you're somebody who this is your area. So this is a model I think that could be replicated across the region if you have the right, you know, kind of alignment of nonprofits and donors in place. This is a fund. It's called Thrive East of the River. I don't believe it's related to Thrive Arlington. That is giving $5,500 in cash to struggling families in the district's poorest ward. That's Ward 8. It's no strings attached. You know, they don't care how you spend the money. You know, it's here's the money, do what you got to do. And anecdotal evidence suggests, you know, so far that the money has helped keep families housed during the pandemic, right? So I interviewed one recipient of the assistance who said she is going to use the money to finally get an apartment for herself and her son. You know, she lost her job as a hairstylist during the pandemic. She's been moving from house to house with a toddler. But she received a $5,500 payment from Thrive East of the River. And for the first time in months, she's actually anticipating being stably housed, right?
Wow.
This is a game changer, right?
That's a great success story.
It is. And this is notable because, of course, you know, there are lots of ad hoc programs out there from government, from nonprofits that provide, you know, similar assistance. But it's rare that you'll find just a straight up cash assistance with no restrictions on how the funds are spent, right? I mean, with no means testing. You don't have to stay poor or stay jobless in order to collect these monthly cash payments with this program. That's big. So I can go out and get a job while I'm also receiving this necessary assistance that helps me keep a roof over my head, right? So it's different, and it reduces the administrative burden on people who are usually forced to jump through all of these hoops, which one advocate described to me as being very dignity stripping hoops. You know, these administrative hoops you have to go through to get money. You know, this is very different, and it's a different way of giving people access to relief dollars. I think it's very interesting.
And is that like a one-time you get $5,500? You get that.
You actually have a choice. The recipient chooses whether they want a lump sum of $5,500 or a 5 months dispersal of $1,100 a month. So it's up to you. And that was actually intentional on the part of the people who created this program. And it was something that Kim R. Ford at Martha's Table came up with. You know, it was the whole idea is we trust you. We're not going to be condescending about how you use this money. This money is for you. You use it as you see fit. And if we're committing to giving you $5,500, if you want it all at once, we're in for that. Let's do it. So I find this program, personally, I find it pretty inspiring. I would love to see similar programs emerge.
Wow, that's good. We'll have to see how that all turns out. So moving on, that's very innovative and it's very inspiring. And hopefully other people start thinking outside of the box in terms of ways to help people. There's no one right way. So the important thing is helping people. So how can and should people and organizations help? Like what's your opinion on that?
I mean, like we talked about a second ago, I mean, I think individuals have a lot more power than they realized before the pandemic. And I think that's because I think the division between the people like folks like us who still have our jobs, you know, who still have income, we're seeing the level of suffering that's taking place in communities where people have been ravaged by job loss, who might be ravaged by illness, who aren't qualified to get assistance because perhaps they're undocumented residents and things like that. I think that the gap is more visible than it's been in a long time, if not ever. And so I think private individuals who are privileged, and I count myself among them because I still have a job, we need to step up and we need to do more. And it needs to come directly from our pockets. And I say this as a human being, and even more than just a journalist, you know, but there are a lot, the unemployment rate in this region is not bad compared to how it is in places like Nevada, where you have the unemployment rate is crazy high because all of these tourism jobs are lost. We have a good federal job sector here. We have a good professional services job sector here that's pretty stable still. And so we know there are a lot of people who have money. Where is that money going to flow? Don't spend it all on Amazon right now, okay? Think a little bit about your local food bank, think
Right.
a little bit about your local housing provider, and start I'm saying this again from a personal perspective, not not so much a journalist, but give away some of your money because people need it bad. And we know that the government is not doing all that it can because it's limited too. I mean, but I'm speaking particularly about the federal government. State governments, they only have so much money they can throw around, but the federal government can literally print money to solve
Absolutely, they
this
can.
crisis.
There's a lot they can do to solve the crisis.
Exactly, right.
So I have to say, as an AHC board member, I have to say that AHC is stepping up. And some of the people that are listening to our conversation are supporters of AHC. So I don't have to tell them, but anyone else that's listening that is for the first time getting acquainted with AHC, there's everything from giving your money for those gift cards, for the after school program, college prep program, all the various programs that AHC continues to do, even during COVID, adjusted to the times. And so AHC is one example of a place that you can give any amount of money and help solve the problem. So as a board member, I have to highlight AHC because that's where I put my time and my money as well. So what about advocacy? Is that something individuals can do? Advocacy?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to consider the fact that there's just for example, there's the ongoing special session on the state level in Virginia, where you have lawmakers who are actively debating legislation that directly affects renters throughout the state. I mean, one of the things that's been on hold for a while in the General Assembly during the session is a bill that would prolong the eviction ban. That's one thing where advocates have been very out front about it, and they've been basically responsible for keeping this thing alive. I actually think that initiative has been stalled now. Last I saw it I think it moved to committee at like the end of August or something. It's been a while. It's been stagnant. But I will say that at least in the district, what I've seen a lot of is advocates being very, very vocal about tenant protections, and that has directly led to legislation on the council level. Now, say what you will about some of the measures that the DC Council has taken, maybe to a lot of advocates, they don't go nearly far enough. I think a lot of advocates really want to see rent control expanded in the district, and that's something that's a little bit dicey right now. We don't know where that's going to go. So I think that advocates have a direct line now to lawmakers, and lawmakers are listening. We've seen that reflected in the types of pro-tenant legislation that the DC Council has passed. Maryland General Assembly is not in session till next year, but on the local level in Montgomery County, they're actively legislating around the crisis right now. There's ample opportunity, I think, for advocates to have their message heard, and reporters like me are covering it.
All right. Well, thank you. You are so knowledgeable. We are just so pleased that you were able to join us today because you are an expert in this area. Do we have a call for action? Call to action? What would you say? I think maybe all of us working together.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm supposed
You're
to
the
be
only
an
one I'm
impartial
interviewing, so
observer here.
It's a rhetorical question, but
don't ask the reporter. I think that the panelists and the advocates who are watching right now, they know what to take from this conversation.
All right, absolutely. Well, it takes all of us working together, and I really so much appreciate you bringing it all together for us during this wonderful conversation. And so people can follow you at WAMU Radio, the NPR affiliate, following that affordability project that you've been doing for the past year. So you are the go-to expert. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wanda. I can't wait to hear you. I got to listen to your radio show.
Yeah, your philanthropy matters.